Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Yacht Crew Wine Guide. Today, as a first episode, I thought we would talk about wine tasting and how wine tasting is different as opposed to drinking wine. When you taste wine, you try to take the wine apart into different parts to more understand it and to really appreciate the differences. When you just drink a wine, perhaps you say, well, that's a nice wine or that's not a nice wine, but without putting words on your sensation, it's very difficult afterwards to describe the wine or to remember how a wine tasted, and perhaps also to communicate about the wine. If you have charter guests and they ask, well, how is this Sancerre tasting? If you haven't practiced wine tasting, it's very difficult to describe actually how it does taste. So we will go through some basics of wine tasting, and I would like to say something. There seems to be a bit of snobbery around wine tasting and wine knowledge, which is a shame, because wine is here for our pleasure, and it's only here for our pleasure and to relax with and to enjoy. And I think there are some wine journalists have a very romantic and floral language when they describe wines, and perhaps that has intimidated some people, so they feel that they can't express their sensations about a wine. We had Swedish journalists many years ago who described a wine like, oh, this wine smells like a sweaty horse that's been running over a flowery meadow, and people, even that was his perhaps initial sensation, people can't relate to that, so of course you can't describe a wine like that. So when we do wine tasting here at the Yacht Crew Wine Guide, I will try to describe the wines in terms of fruit and floral and leather and mushroomy, earthy aromas, so people actually can what you're talking about, so it's easier to understand what style of wine there is. So when you do wine tasting, you start by looking at the color, then you smell the wine, and then you taste the wine, and then you judge the quality of the wine. So the first aspect about color, so here we have a Burgundy wine from 95. You look at the color of the wine, and that perhaps is not so interesting looking at the color. It's more interesting when it comes to red wine than it comes to white wines. What you can tell about the color, if it's a wine is mature or not. If it's a white wine, a young white wine will be very pale and almost have a green limey color to it, and a more mature white wine will be more golden and perhaps a bit darker generally. And for red wines, a young red wine will be almost purplish red, and then it goes, as it ages, it will become more bricky or tawny colored or garnet, as you say when a wine is starting to become more on the brown side. So this wine is from 95, so it has a garnet color. You can see on the rim, which is the edge of the color. So already just by looking at this wine, we see that this is a mature wine. Perhaps you also see in wine tasters or looking at then they do a glass like this, and then they look at the tiers or the legs, or they have different windows. I've heard people use that word. And that I find not so of interest, because it only tells you the consistency or the viscosity of the wine, and the viscosities will be dependent on the sugar level or the alcohol in the wine, and that you will be able to tell when you taste the wine anyway, so I never look at those legs. Then you smell the wine, and generally you tend to smell it once without agitating the glass, because there are some aromas that are very, very volatile. So if you would spin the glass around before you did that initial smell, some of those volatile aromas that can give you hints to what the wine is or the quality of the wine might be lost. Of course, it's not necessary to do that, but according to all the rules, that's how you do taste. Then you spin the glass around like this, because then you put oxygen in the wine, and by putting oxygen in, the wine will open up and you will feel much more aromas. And then you smell the wine, and in the first one you smell, it's difficult. You say, well, it smells of wine. It's very difficult to find those special aromas, because generally you don't describe how things smell. You describe how things looks or how you feel, but not how things smells. So then it's good, you can start dividing it into two big families, like one floral, fruity, fresh and crisp, like, and then the other family perhaps more leathery, mushroomy, earthy, heavier autumn aromatics. And this, if we would have like a Sauvignon Blanc here from New Zealand, we would have a lot of lime, some passion fruit, maybe hints of flower, very vibrant and crisp and pungent. So that will be the first family. This old Burgundy wine is in the second family, because here we have some notes of leather, some earthy, mushroomy, vegetal, even some compost notes, with some faded strawberry fruit, but it's really the more of the secondary aromatics here. And then the nose is really telling a lot about the quality of a wine. If a wine is complex, a complex wine means that you can smell very many different things in a wine. If it's just smelling of mango or passion fruit, it's not going to be so complex. It's quite one-dimensional. But if you smell a whole range of different things, that there will be a complex wine, and you can sit and you can, as time goes by and the first sip is smelling like this, and after 10 minutes it's developed new aromas, and it can be very thrilling if you're into wines. I think it's very thrilling, exciting. Then you taste, and I will take my spittoon. When you taste the wine, as perhaps you know, on your palate, your tongue can only feel salt, bitter, sweet and sour. That's the four sensations we can taste. So the reason why we can taste the difference between strawberries and raspberries, for example, is that we use our nose. And that's why when we have a cold, we can't really taste so much. It's because our nose are blocked. And when you taste wine, you tend to draw a bit of air into your mouth and do a surpling sound, and that's to activate the nose from the behind, so you can get much more flavors out of the wine. So you do like this. And I spit, because we're going to taste a lot of wines today, so otherwise I will become intoxicated. Then on the palate, you will judge things like the body, if it's a light-bodied wine or if it's a full-bodied wine or in between, and how the body is. It's like a skim milk would be a light-bodied milk and cream would be full-bodied. So it's the consistency and the mouth, how it's coating the sensations in the mouth. And then you talk about acidity, if it's high acidity or low acidity or moderate. And acidity, sometimes it's difficult to judge acidity, but if it makes you salivate, it's high acidity. And if it doesn't, it's a bit lower. And certain grape varieties like Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling, they have very high acidity, while others like a ripe New World Chardonnay would have much lower acidity. Then for red wines, you talk about tannins. And tannins in red wine, that's what makes a red wine a bit dry. You have this dry sensation on the palate. And tannins, if you don't know what there are, you could take a grape and peel the grape and chew on the grape skin. That will give you a very good sensation of what tannins are. And also, if you have black tea and you leave the bag in for a very long time, then that tea is going to be very dry and harsh and tannic. And tannins, you only find tannins in the red wines, and it is what makes a red wine last long, together with other things as well. And tannins will soften with age. So sometimes when you drink a red wine which is very, very tannic and dry, that could be a sign that perhaps the wine is not ready to drink yet and that it needs some more time in bottle to become softer. Once you tasted the wine, perhaps you heard about the finish or the length of the wine. Oh, this has a good length. Or long length, and length is a key indicator to quality in a wine, and it's not, the length is difficult to judge in the beginning, but it means how long does the aromas or the flavors stay on the palate, not how long you felt, because I still feel that I just had a sip of wine, but it's more the tannins and the acidity that lingers. It's not the flavors, because this didn't have a very long length. But a top high quality wine will have a very, very long length, and that's, as I said, a key indicator to quality. And when you taste wines like this, you really try to take them apart. Perhaps you lose a bit of the pleasure in the beginning, but when you force yourself to actually measure those things or make notes, and this smells of passion fruit and mango, and it has a really refreshing acidity and is medium bodied. Just by doing those few words, you will have forced yourself to put words on your sensations, and when you have a Charlie guest who asks, well, how is this Chardonnay from Napa Valley, what does it taste like? Then you can actually, well, I remember it has these notes of mango and this, and it has a full-bodied and had some vanilla notes from the oak, because perhaps you looked at the label and you saw it was oaked. Then that gives a clear picture to the client or to the Charlie guest what kind of wine it is. And of course this is not something you learn in very short time. This is just a presentation of how to taste. I think I recommend you to do it when you open wines on board for guests. If there's a possibility, try to taste them yourself, and that way you will really learn, and you will see that actually the Chardonnays do tend to taste like this, and the Cabernet tends to taste like this. And of course at the Yacht Crew Wine Guide we will taste a lot of wines, and if you follow these episodes you'll definitely learn quite a lot that I hope you will find very useful. So I look forward to seeing you soon again. Thank you for listening.